Man. So you're there in Revelation chapter 8, and we are continuing our study through the book of Revelation, and we saw in chapter 6 and 7, we really see the tribulation and the great tribulation, the rapture, and this chapter we're going to be getting into the wrath of God. So up to that point where we get to Revelation chapter 7, a lot of that stuff's pertinent to, if we're here in that time, or even if we're not here in that time, that's where we're going to be. We're going to be caught up together with him in the clouds. If we die before he comes, we're going to rise first, because the dead in Christ shall rise first. But in chapter 8 here, we're going to be getting into the wrath of God. And the Bible teaches that we're not appointed unto wrath, and that we as saved people will not be here for that. But it's still interesting to see what's going to happen and to see how this plays out and all that. The first thing we see here is in Revelation chapter 8 and verse 1. It says, "And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour." Now, what you have to understand is that this is a big event. And I believe this is when the book is open. So in chapter 5, you see that there's this book that has 7 seals. And I think I had my makeshift. It got smashed. All right, so, not horrible. Okay, but anyway. So in chapter 5, I talked about how it would be a scroll, because it said you could, there was writings within and on the backside. And for you to know that there's writings within, it had to be like a scroll. And I proved that a book is synonymous with a scroll a lot of times in the Bible. And so, not that this isn't a book, but if I close this book up, you wouldn't know whether something was written within it. Okay, it could be blank for all you know. But here you can see, okay, there's stuff written in it and on the back side, because that's how you'd roll up a scroll. But that being said, is that it's sealed with 7 seals, and I believe the way it works is that as the Lamb, or as Jesus is taking off these seals and you're pulling these seals off, the book isn't opened yet. And it's not until you get to that 7th seal that you can actually open up the book and see what's written inside. And so this, I believe, is where that 7th seal is coming off, and now the book's being opened. So there's silence. So imagine you have this book that John is weeping because no one was worthy to open up the book to see what was written therein. But then there was joy because the Lamb, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, was worthy to open up this book. And this is where I believe it happens. It doesn't say the book was open, but at the same time, if that 7th seal is open, what's going to happen? That book's going to be open, and I believe this is going to reveal God's wrath that's going to be poured out. But there's silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. I want you to think about that for a second. Sometimes we read over something like this. Half an hour. That's 30 minutes of just pure silence. That's a big deal. I mean, just think about if I took 5 seconds right now and just stopped talking. Think about that for 30 minutes. But obviously, everything's going silent. So you can imagine be like the anticipation of like what's in this book, right? You open up the book and everybody's just like waiting for this book to be open, waiting for this book to be open. Christians are being killed. All this stuff's going on. The book's not open yet. Then that 7th seal opens, and then there's just like silence, like, what's in this book? What's going to happen? And that's what's going on here. Now, another verse that kind of makes me think about this passage right here is go to Zechariah chapter 2. Zechariah chapter 2. So Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Does that help you at all? Actually, you should probably go Matthew, Malachi, going back to Zechariah. That'd probably help you about a little more. It's like trying to get you into the minor prophets. I'm like, all right, you're in Zephaniah, and then you want to go to Haggai, and you're like, where am I at? If you're having trouble finding it. But in Zechariah chapter 2 and verse 13, notice what it says. "Be silent, O all flesh, before the Lord, for he is raised up out of his holy habitation." And I believe that's what's going on right here, is that God is about to go to work. That's the modern vernacular, right? About to do work. He's about to do work on this world. He's about to do a work that people are going to marvel at. And it's saying, be silent, and all of heaven is silent. for a space of half an hour. And just thinking, like probably anticipation of what's going to happen. Another verse, go to Jeremiah chapter 4 and verse 5. Jeremiah 4 and verse 5 is the idea of God coming, raising up out of his habitation. I mean, obviously Jesus came he had come in the clouds and he was, he raptured us out. But it's time for the wrath to be poured out. It's time for God to do work. It's time for God to work. And notice what it says in Jeremiah 4 and verse 5. Jeremiah 4 and verse 5, it says, "Declare ye in Judah and publish in Jerusalem, and say, Blow ye the trumpet in the land. Cry, gather together, and say, Assemble yourselves, and let us go into the defense cities. Set up a standard toward Zion. Retire, stay not. For I will bring evil from the north, and a great destruction. The lion is come up from his thicket, and the destroyer of the Gentiles is on his way, and he is gone forth from his place to make thy land desolate, and thy cities shall be laid waste without an inhabitant. For this gird you with sackcloth, lament and howl, for the fierce anger of the Lord is not turned back from us." So you think about the Lion of the tribe of Judah that's opening this book, well, he's raising himself up. And you know what? God is being raised from his holy habitation to rain down fire on this earth. And that's exactly what's going to happen, among other things. And listen, if there's tribulation, such as the world has never seen, that's being put on God's people, then there's going to be wrath on this world, which has never been seen before, since the beginning of the world. So think of all the things that God has done in the past when it comes from the plagues of Egypt to just other things that he's done throughout the Old Testament. Think about all those things. Think about even things that aren't written in the Bible, but we probably know are God's wrath. Obviously Sodom and Gomorrah, you could think of that. But how about, Pompeii? You don't think that's the judgment of God when a volcano literally destroyed a city that was known for sodomy? And that volcano just completely annihilated that city? And think about all those things that destroyed cities, destroyed people, and that God was pouring out his wrath on. And think about that being amplified, because that's what's going to happen. Now, we see here, notice in verse 2 of Revelation chapter 8, and verse 2, we see the first thing that comes out, or the first thing that we see here are these 7 angels, and they have 7 trumpets. So in verse 2 here, it says, "And I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets." Now, I always try to look at every word here as being pertinent to what we're looking at. And the first thing I see here is that I saw the 7 angels. I think that's always interesting when you have that definite article, the 7 angels. It's not like he saw 7 angels. He saw the 7 angels which stood before God. Meaning these 7 angels have a specific purpose to pour out God's wrath, and they're given these 7 trumpets. Now, what I'm going to show you, or is my belief, is that I believe these same 7 angels are going to be the same 7 angels that are pouring out the vials. Now, if you don't believe it's the same 7 angels, I believe you're going to agree with me anyway that the trumpets and the vials are being cast, or they're being done concurrently, meaning that you have the first trumpet that's blown and the first vial is being poured out. Second trumpet's blown, second vial is poured out. Okay? And I personally believe that this is the same, because there's 7 angels that are given the 7 last plagues, which are full of the wrath of God, and they're given 7 golden vials. Okay? And I'm going to show you that when we go through these trumpets, how they match up perfectly. Okay? But I want to show you a story in the Bible that I believe, a couple stories that kind of correlate to this event. Okay? Go to Joshua chapter 6. Joshua chapter 6, and this is the story of Jericho, the walls falling at Jericho. And there just happens to be 7 trumpets that are mentioned here. Now, there's a story also that I'm going to show you in Judges dealing with Gideon. And I believe these things correlate, or these things foreshadow, if anything, the ultimate judgment that's going to happen. Because you think of Jericho, obviously Jericho's a wicked city that God's going to destroy. Rahab's the only, Rahab the harlot and her family are the only people that survive this attack. But these 7 trumpets that are blown is an offense of God. And notice what it says in verse 2. So Joshua 6, verse 2, it says, And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days. So for 6 days, they're just walking around the city. And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets. So basically, 6 days they're going around the city. The 7th day they go around 7 times, and on the 7th time they blow with these trumpets. And can anyone hear ram's horn and not think of that guy that visited our church at one time? But this is Bible. These are ram's horns. They're 7 trumpets, right? But it says in verse 5, it says, And it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when ye hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up, every man straight before him. So we're talking about God's people going to battle and winning this battle. Here we see that God has these 7 trumpets, these 7 angels with 7 trumpets that are going to sound. Okay? And each trumpet has a plague associated with it. But what I want to show you is Judges chapter 7. Judges chapter 7. I just want to show you that, hey, this was foreshadowed. This isn't like out of the blue where are these 7 trumpets coming from, and how it correlates, that we're dealing with God dealing out punishment. Okay? And in verse 16, and just for sake of we're dealing with Gideon and his 300. I don't want to go through the whole story here, but Gideon and his 300, they're put into 3 different groups of 100. But what I want you to see here is what you always hear. You think of the story and you think about the fact that they're yelling the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. That's probably what I think of when I think of this. But I want you to look at the details here as far as what they have, what they're holding. Okay, notice what it says in verse 16. And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put a trumpet in every man's hand with empty pitchers and lamps within the pitchers. And he said unto them, Look on me, and do likewise. And behold, when I come to the outside of the camp, it shall be that as I do, so shall ye do. When I blow with the trumpet, I and all that are with me, then blow ye the trumpets also on every side of all the camp, and say, The sword of the Lord and of Gideon. So Gideon and the 100 men that were with him came unto the outside of the camp in the beginning of the middle watch, and they had but newly set the watch, and they blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers that were in their hands. Notice that they have a trumpet. They also have pitchers that they're breaking that happen to have fire inside of them. Okay. Now notice what it says in verse 20. And the 3 companies blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers and held the lamps in their left hands, and the trumpets in their right hands to blow withal. And they cried, The sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And they stood every man in his place round about the camp. And all the host ran and cried and fled. So in both cases, you have basically the wicked dying or fleeing. But in Joshua, you see 7 trumpets that are mentioned. It gives you a number on those trumpets. Here we see that there's 300. So essentially you could have 300. Each one of them has a trumpet. But do you notice that in the right hand they have a trumpet, and in the left hand they have a pitcher? Now, we're talking about a pitcher like you pour out something, right? We're not talking about like a pitcher frame or something like that. They have a pitcher, and they're breaking the pitcher and blowing the trumpet. Sound familiar? Now, I know this isn't exactly what it says in Revelation, but you have them blowing a trumpet. In Revelation 8, you have these trumpets that are blowing till you get to Revelation 11. And then in Revelation 16, or 15 and 16, you have these vials that are being poured out. And what I believe is going on is you have these 7 angels that are blowing a trumpet with one hand and pouring out a vial with the other hand. And it's going down the line with each angel doing it in order of the first to the second to the third to the fourth. Does that make sense? And I'm going to show you that on how that works and how they correlate. Okay. But here's the thing. If you think they're different angels, okay, like there's the different 7 angels are blowing the different 7 trumpets, and the different 7 angels that are pouring out the vials. I don't have an issue with you. I'm just saying I see that when I look at Judges 7, and I see the story of Gideon and how they have it in each hand. Okay? And the reason that it's interesting is because when we get to those vials, what's interesting about that is those 7 angels are actually Christians. Those angels are actually saved people that are pouring out those vials. And I'm going to show you that eventually because we know it's a saved person because one of those 7 angels that has the 7 last plagues is showing a vision to John. And it specifically says that. Then he goes to worship before this angel and he says, "See thou do it not. I'm of thy brethren." That's an interesting point to be made. And it would be very interesting if it's the same person, the same people that are blowing the trumpets as well. And the reason I think it's interesting is because of how it correlates with the fact that the wrath of God is the recompense for the saints. Okay? And notice what it says in Revelation chapter 8 and verse 3. Revelation 8 and verse 3. It says, "And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense, which came with the prayer of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake." So before the trumpets even begin to sound, there's fire that's being thrown down on the earth. So, and you'll see that, when you see the day of the Lord, what do you see? Fire and brimstone being poured down on the earth. So that literally happens before any of this other stuff happens, is that the day of the Lord, when we're raptured out, fire's coming down. But it's interesting because see how it correlates, what's being cast down with the prayers of saints? Go to Revelation chapter 5 and verse 8. I kind of mentioned this when we were going through Revelation 5 that I'd get back to this verse. Because when we're talking about this book with 7 seals, this verse pops up here and it's pertinent because it's pertinent to that book. When that book is opened, then you see this, about these, the odors and the incense and the prayers of the saints being mentioned. And notice what it says in Revelation chapter 5, verse 8. It says, "And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps," notice this, "and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of saints." So that's mentioned when he's taking this book out, and then he's mentioning, they have these vials that have these odors and incense, and obviously in chapter 8 it talks about incense and all this, as far as the prayers of saints that are basically ascending up to God. And what is this talking about? Well, go to Psalm 56. Psalm 56. I believe that every prayer of every saint that they have prayed for God's help and for God, to either, the imprecatory prayers that go up before God, that, think of Psalm 55, Psalm 58, where it says, "Break their teeth, O God, in their mouth, and, let them pass away, and melt as a snail, and, let them pass away as an untimely birth of a woman," and these imprecatory prayers, meaning like a curse that you're putting on, people that are your enemies. And most of the time, when you're talking about imprecatory prayers, you're dealing with those that are haters of God, those that are children of the devil. Okay, I'm not talking about the person that like slammed the door in your face when you're out soul winning and you start like just giving them this imprecatory prayer. I'm talking about pedophiles. I'm talking about psychopaths. I'm talking about people that hate God, that want to hurt children, that want to, basically hurt anything that's good, that are despisers of those that are good. We're talking about evil people, okay, that cannot sleep unless they do evil, okay, and cause some to fall. That being said, who particularly is all these, the wrath of God hitting directly? If you know Revelation, they're hitting those that took the mark of the beast, which are now children of the devil. They are sealed. They're damned. And those people is going to be getting hit the most with the wrath of God. And you know what? God's people, their prayers are being answered. So I want you to know that God hears your prayers, and ultimately it's coming on this earth. And you may not live to see it in the flesh, Think about all the generations from time past that didn't get to see the judgment being poured out. But you think about the souls that are underneath the altar in Revelation chapter 6 and the fact that they're saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood? They're crying out. And you know what? God hears it. And notice what it says here in Psalm 56. And I want to read verse 1 down to verse 9 here. It says, Be merciful unto me, O God, for man shall swallow me up. He fighting daily oppresseth me. Mine enemies would daily swallow me up, for they be many that fight against me, O thou most high. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. In God I will praise his word. In God I have put my trust, and I will not fear what flesh can do unto me. Every day they wrest my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They gather themselves together. They hide themselves. They mark my steps when they wait for my soul. Shall they escape by iniquity? In thine anger cast down the people, O God. Thou tellest my wanderings. Notice this. Put thou my tears into thy bottle. Are they not in thy book? When I cry unto thee, then shall mine enemies turn back. This I know, for God is for me. Now think about that when he opened up the book. And I believe that God has on record your tears and your prayers that you're crying out to him for. And he'll remember that in that day of judgment. And go to Malachi chapter 3. I'm going to read to you 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 12. It says, For the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. Isn't it interesting how he's hearing the prayers of the righteous, but his face is against them that do evil? And the Bible says, I believe it's in Deuteronomy, it says he will repay those that hate the Lord, he will repay them to their face. That's what the Bible teaches. And so there was another verse. Actually, you're in Malachi chapter 3. I forgot to put this in my notes. I just came to mind there. And it's in James. That's it. James chapter 5. So I knew I forgot something. You know when you think of it, like you're writing a sermon and you're like, that'd be a good verse there, and then I just completely forget to put it down. Where is it at? It says, Go to now, you rich man, and it goes down through this whole line. In verse 4 it says, Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down my fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in the day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. Be patient, therefore, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waited for the precious fruit of the earth, and he hath long patience for it until it receive the early and latter rain. Be ye also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. So God is hearing these cries. He's hearing the affliction and everything that's going on. And listen, when you're in the great tribulation, which is that the world has never seen before, I guarantee you're going to have a lot of cries for help. You're going to have a lot of prayers that are coming to God in that time. And all of that is going to be brought to remembrance on the wicked. Go to Malachi 3 and verse 16. It says, Then they that feared the Lord spake often one to another. Now this is just a good principle in general. Okay, those that fear the Lord, speak often one to another. Fellowship with each other. That's why we have church. That's why we have fellowships, that we're together with those that believe and that fear the Lord. But notice what it says here. And the Lord hearkened and heard it, and a book of remembrance was written before him for them that feared the Lord and that thought upon his name. Notice how God is remembering this. He's writing it in a book. He's putting your tears in a bottle. And I believe that when this book is open, that's being brought to remembrance, and there's no coincidence that the prayers of the saints are ascending up as incense to the Lord as the wrath of God is being poured out on the world. So go to Revelation chapter 15. Revelation chapter 15. So that's just a thought, and it's interesting because when you're dealing with, like I said, the seven angels, I'm going to show you here, which have the seven vials full of the wrath of God. Do you remember what the prayers of saints were in Revelation 5? Golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of saints. All right, well, let's read this. And I know we're going ahead here. Obviously, I'm going to be hitting on this chapter holistically, but I want you to see this. In verse 1 here it says, "And I saw another sign in heaven, and great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God." Notice in verse 7 here, "And one of the 4 beasts gave unto the 7 angels 7 golden vials full of the wrath of God, who liveth forever and ever. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no man was able to enter into the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were fulfilled." Now, I'm going to prove to you without a shadow of doubt that those 7 angels are actually saved believers, that they are, I'm of your brethren the prophets. That's what this one angel says to him. An angel just means a messenger. And so we saw from the 7 churches in Asia that the angel was the preacher, the leader, if you will, of the church, the pastor, the bishop, the overseer. And it's interesting to think that even with the 7 trumpets that would apply, that when God's pouring out this wrath, that you have these 7 angels, which either way you look at this, if this happens concurrently, you'd have those 7 angels there from the very beginning of God's wrath, right? Because the first vial is going to correlate with the first trumpet. Okay, so just something to think about there on how this may work, as far as you have an angel, which is a brother in Christ, that is pouring out wrath based off the prayers of saints, and how you have the wrath of God. And you think about the fact that the wrath is being determined, obviously, by the wickedness that they've done, but it's also being determined based off the prayers of the saints as well. And so God does not take that lightly when you ask for help, when you're calling out for him. And some people are like, well, does he really hear? He hears, and he remembers. And you may not see the vengeance in your life. One day we will, and we'll all see it. From Adam, all the way up to when Jesus comes, all those that suffered affliction, that were done unjust, all these different things, that this is going to be poured out upon the earth. Now, let's look at these trumpets. So we see the first 4 trumpets mentioned here in this chapter. Now, again, when you're dealing with Revelation, and I know I've hit this before, when you think of Revelation, you got to cut it in half, meaning from Revelation 1 to 11, it's all chronological. Chapter 12 goes back to the beginning, to where you have, actually, to the birth of Christ. But then you have the fact that it goes to tribulation, rapture, wrath, and goes through that again. So when you go to Revelation 12, you're starting over and going through the story again and getting more information. So if you just read through it and think it's all just chronological from Revelation 1 to 22, you're going to think that the vials come after, right? You have the trumpets blow, and then things happen, and then you have the vials that are being poured out. But if you understand that that's how it's cut in half, and no marvel, because that's how Daniel's cut in half. Daniel 1 through 6 is all chronological, from Nebuchadnezzar all the way to Cyrus, or Darius, actually. But then it steps back in chapter 7 and goes to Belshazzar again, which is the king of Babylon that dies. But then it goes to Cyrus at the end of Daniel. So Revelation is the same way. And what I'm going to show you here is that these trumpets and vials match up perfectly. Look what it says in Revelation 8 and verse 6. Revelation 8 and verse 6. So the trumpets, the 7 trumpets here, it says, "And the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of the trees was burned up, and all green grass was burned up." So what do we see here? And I think the things that I want you to see here is that, well, you have hail and fire mingled with blood, but specifically what I want you to see here is, what is it being cast upon? Upon the earth. Okay? So the first trumpet that's blown, you have this judgment that's coming upon the earth. Go to Revelation chapter 16. So you're going to keep your finger in Revelation 8 and in Revelation 16. Now, they don't have to match up perfectly because they are different types of judgments, okay? But what you're going to see is that what it's affecting is both the same, okay? What we're going to see here is you're going to see earth, sea, rivers, and then sun, like the sun, moon, and stars. And with the trumpets, it's going to be in that order. With the vials, it's going to be in that order. And notice what it says in Revelation 16, verse 2. And it says, and the first went and poured out his vial upon the what? The earth. And there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. So we see that on both these, the first trumpet and the first vial, what's this going on? Or what's this being cast upon? The earth. And in the trumpet, you see hail and fire mingled with blood. And then in the vial, you see the fact that there's this noisome and grievous sore that's upon them. So it's accompanying this. So when you look at this wrath, there's stuff that's happening at the same time. Okay. Now, go to Revelation chapter 8 and verse 8. We'll see the second trumpet. The second trumpet, it says, or verse 8 here says, and the second angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood, and the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. Now, the thing that you're going to see here, now, obviously, what is that upon? The first one was upon the earth. The second one was upon the sea. The thing that you're going to see with the trumpets is the fact that it keeps saying the third part, the third part, the third part. When you get to the vials, it's everything. So I believe the trumpet's blown, the vials poured out. Trumpet's blown, vials poured out. So I think it's very clear that the trumpet blows first, and then the vials poured out, which is how, Revelation is obviously showing you the trumpets first, then the vials. And you think about they blew the trumpet and break the pitchers, and with the story with Gideon. But look at the second vial. So Revelation 16 and verse 3. It says, and the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea. So you see the difference? There is a little bit of a difference when you're dealing with the trumpets. The trumpets will be like a third part, a third part. Then you get to the vials, it's like all. So what I believe happens is you have, and by the way, this isn't happening like on the same day. I don't believe this is happening on the same day. If you understand the timeline, which we'll get to eventually, the wrath that's being poured out is being poured out over almost 3.5 years. Okay? It's like a little less than 3.5 years, because obviously there's a little bit of that 3.5 years of that 42 months that the beast is reigning, that this wrath is being poured out. A little portion of that was the Great Tribulation, which is about 2.5 months. Okay, so you're dealing with over 3 years that this wrath is being poured out. So I don't know how much space there is between the first trumpet and first vial and the second trumpet and second vial. Does that make sense? Some of these tell you, okay, when we get to Revelation 9 and we get to the fifth trumpet, it is 5 months. When you get to the sixth trumpet, it's a year, a month, a day, and a week, right? I think. It's basically a year and a month, that this is going on. So you get some timeline with those. These, you don't really it doesn't tell you how long these are. So we don't know if, okay, the trumpet blows and it goes on for like weeks, right? And then the vials poured out, okay? I can't tell you how concurrently they happen, but I'll say this. I do believe that the first vial is poured out before the second trumpet blows, okay? That's how I believe it happens. But as far as, like, if it happens the same day, but see, it doesn't make sense to me if it happens the same day, because what's the point of the trumpet, blowing, and like a third part of the sea becomes blood if like just moments later it's going to be all, right? To me, it sounds like it's a culmination where it's like, the first trumpet blows, a third part of the sea becomes blood, and a third part of the creatures that are in the sea, they die, and then it's like, man, all is lost. Yeah, it's not over yet, because everything's going to be blood and everything's going to die, right? But it's like there's a separation there. And so it's kind of building upon each other. And the same thing happens with the third trumpet. Notice what it says in Revelation chapter 8 and verse 10. So this great mountain, and going back to the sea, the second trumpet, that great mountain that's burning could be an asteroid for all we know. I mean, the thing is that it could be a physical thing that you would see out in space or that's happened before, but does it have to be? God obviously can do great miracles, and he can throw whatever he wants down here on the earth. It's like the article, I read this article about Sodom and Gomorrah, and they're like, yeah, there was this, asteroid that blew up over Sodom, and that's, completely annihilated this town, and it lines up perfectly with Genesis. and all that. And therefore, our conclusion is that this happened, and then everybody just wrote stories about it. And that's where the Genesis story came from. It's because some just cataclysmic event happened, and then everybody just wrote stories. Well, it's because they were sodomites, Not to mention that's the reason that it's even called sodomites. Okay, that's how it got its moniker. But that being said, is that it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be some thing that you would see that we see even now happen or anything like that. But obviously, if an asteroid hit the Earth, that would look like a big burning mountain, wouldn't it? If that came down and hit the Earth. And so if it's hitting the sea, and just imagine what that would do. I mean, you think about something like that that's hitting the sea and how that would affect other things and how that would cause tsunamis and just different things that would happen. So, there's obviously things that are happening that are a consequence of that even happening, let alone what it's stating is doing. But you're in Revelation chapter 8 and verse 10, we see the third angel sound. It says, and the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. So wormwood, what is wormwood? Well, wormwood is a shrub. Okay, you can look up a wormwood shrub, and it's a bitter type of plant, meaning they use it to make drinks. What I looked at, they actually make it to use some kind of alcohol or something like that. Not that that's pertinent to anybody here, but the thing is that they call it that, and it's basically called wormwood. But it uses like the Greek word for wormwood and all this stuff as far as this drink. But it's basically something that's bitter. So something interesting is the fact that Chernobyl means wormwood. And, I've heard this theory, and I'm not against the theory. I think it's very valid, that you think about, well, how in the world is one, and obviously when we're talking about a star, we're not talking about the stars that you would see out in space, as far as like the sun, like the sun came down and just crashed into the earth. It's probably something like a meteor or something like that that's crashing into the earth. But you ask yourself, how do you affect that many rivers, right? You can see the sea because the seas are connected, right? You can see how something big or something like that could affect all that. But how do you affect a third of the rivers, right? And one of the theories, or one of the things that I've heard, which is, I think, very valid, the fact that it's called wormwood, and even in our days, we've heard of Chernobyl, which is, another language for wormwood. And the idea is that if let's say you have some tsunamis, right? And we've seen this, and it wasn't Chernobyl, it was somewhere in Japan that they had a meltdown based off a tsunami, like a tsunami hit. What was it? Fukushima, yeah. And based off of that, that's what caused the meltdown. And so you think about there's nuclear reactors everywhere, and then these cataclysmic things are happening that cause this ripple effect, and that event affected even people in the U.S. They were picking up radiation in California, I believe, and that type of stuff can affect a big area if that were to happen. Okay, and we were joking because we were talking about different fuel or different energy sources, and I was talking with Pastor Anderson about it, and we were just talking about what's the best. We're talking about windmills and how they're horrible, and that's not a good idea. but ultimately, nuclear power is probably the most efficient and way to go. The only downside is that if you had some meltdown, that could be a catastrophe. And we were talking about this with wormwood, and how God may use these basically nuclear plants to cause these things to happen. Where obviously, if you have radiation in your water, you've made it bitter, right? You made it undrinkable, and it will kill you, right? And we were just joking about it. It was but then you have that happen, and we're just we're just fulfilling biblical prophecy, right? So just build all these plants, and we'll live off that. And then when God pours His wrath on the earth, He's going to use that to destroy the earth. But you see that a third part is being affected there. And notice in go to Revelation chapter 16, verse 4. Revelation 16, verse 4. It says, and the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and fountains of water. Sound familiar? So we see that these line up perfectly. You have earth, sea, rivers, and fountains of waters in all three of these cases. And they became blood. Now, there's more to this vial, but again, I want to get into those when we get into Revelation 16. Okay, so I don't want to steal my thunder on all that. But I just want you to see that, what do you see? You see earth, sea, rivers. So it makes sense that you have first trumpet sound, first vial pours out, earth is being affected. Then you have the second trumpet sounds, second vial is poured out, the sea. The third trumpet sounds, third vial is poured out, you have the rivers and fountains of waters. Then go to Revelation chapter 8 and verse 12. We have the fourth trumpet. The fourth trumpet is going to affect things that are outside of the earth, if you will. The sun, moon, and stars. Revelation 8 and verse 12, it says, and the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars. As the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. So when we look at this fourth vial, it should have something to do with at least, the sun or the constellations or something, right? Revelation 16 verse 8, and it says, and the fourth angel poured out his vial upon what? The sun. And power was given unto him to scorch men with fire. So what you can learn from this is that when you're looking at these trumpets, there's other things that are happening. You have darkness that's being done, that's being put upon the earth for a third part of it. So the third part of the day is dark when it's usually light. But then you have like this angel that's pouring out this vial and he's scorching men with fire. And so these things are happening at the same time. And the thing that I've heard people say, they'll try to say like, well, this proves that the heliocentric model of the earth going around the sun, this can't work because how do you smite a third part of the sun and how does that work? Well, if it's geocentristic, if it's that, how does that work? Okay? If you took out a third of the sun, it'd still be bright. Okay? Now, you say, well, what is it? What do you think's happening? Well, what you have to understand is what is it saying? What is it saying is happening? It's saying that a third part of the day is dark. A third part of the night is dark. That's essentially what's happening, right? A third part of the day, third part of the night. So what do you see at night? You see the moon and the stars. What do you see in the day? You see the sun. So during the day, there's going to be a third part of that day that's going to be dark when it's usually light. And when it's night, there's going to be a third part that's going to be completely dark. You're not going to see the sun, or you're not going to see the moon or the stars. Okay, does that make sense? The fact that we're on a globe Earth, and flat earthers would say like, oh, well, this is why it's flat, because well, first of all, your whole flat Earth model doesn't work anyway because there's not a sunshade on. It's not like that thing over there. It's not like this. Like the shade is like down on the Earth, circling us around like this. Okay. The thing is that I do believe there's something that God is doing to make it dark on the Earth, and that is causing it to be dark for a third part of it. Okay, I don't believe that he's literally destroying the sun and destroying the moon and destroying the stars. You know why? Because they're mentioned later on. Okay, so it's just like when the stars fall from heaven when Jesus comes in the clouds. That doesn't mean like all the stars are just completely destroyed, or what are we talking about here? The stars are still there, the moon's still there, the sun's still there. Now let me show you a passage in the Bible to explain what I believe is going on at this time. Go to Ezekiel chapter 32. Ezekiel chapter 32. This will explain also the event that happens when Jesus comes in the clouds. Meaning this is that when Jesus comes in the clouds, there's two things that you notice, right? The sun is darkened and the moon does not give her light. Now, what people will say is like, well, it's a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse. Well, problem is that you can't have both those at the same time. Okay? A solar eclipse is when the moon goes in front of the sun, right? And blocks the sun. A lunar eclipse is literally the opposite, where the earth is blocking, like the sun is on one side of the earth and the moon is on the other side of the earth, and that's what causes it to look like blood. Okay? Is that it's going around the earth, and not to get technical on like how that works, but basically if you had here's the earth, okay? Sun's over here, moon's over here. That's how you have a lunar eclipse. If you have a solar eclipse, the moon has to be over here in front of the sun. So you can't have both of us at the same time. So it's not a matter of like, well, there's a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse happening at the same time. On top of that, who here has seen a solar eclipse? I mean, some of you are old enough. I remember when I was a kid, there was like a full solar eclipse, I think. Do you remember standing outside? Actually, we had a partial solar eclipse not that long ago. And when you stood outside, was it dark? No. It was kind of like not as light, right? You notice it was kind of like, it felt a little eerie, right? You're kind of like, man, it feels a little like, it's like someone turned down the lights a little bit. But it was still daytime. You could still see like you normally could see, right? Because a solar eclipse doesn't make it dark, okay? It just basically brings down the light. Now, the only way that you could even see that that's even happening, when you looked up at the sun, it looked like the sun. You had to have these special glasses that don't burn your retinas out, that you could look up there and you could see the moon was basically covering the sun. If you're thinking about this too, is that only affects certain people in a certain point in the earth, right? When you look at this up later on, when you look at a solar eclipse, like a full solar eclipse, what you'll see is like a little shaded like circle that's going across America that's hitting like a little portion of America. And these happen all over the world. I'm not saying it's just America that happens, but what I'm saying is that it only affects a little portion, and even in those portions, it's not dark. So what's going on here? Well, look at Ezekiel chapter 32 and verse 1. Ezekiel chapter 32 and verse 1, it says, "And it came to pass in the 12th year, in the 12th month, in the first day of the month, that the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, take up lamentation for Pharaoh king of Egypt, and say unto him, Thou art like a young lion of the nations, thou art as a whale in the seas, and thou camest forth with thy rivers, and troublest the waters with thy feet, and fouledest thy rivers." The reason I'm reading this is because God is actually going to judge the rivers that he's talking about here, which is interesting because what happens right before we get to this trumpet being poured out? The rivers are being affected, and specifically with blood, so keep that in mind. Verse 3, it says, "Thus saith the Lord God, I will therefore spread out my net over thee with a company of many people, and they shall bring thee up in my net. Then will I leave thee upon the land, I will cast thee forth upon the open field, and I will cause all the fowls of the heaven to remain upon thee, and I will fill the beasts of the whole earth with thee. And I will lay thy flesh upon the mountains, and will fill the valleys with thy height. I will also water with thy blood the land wherein thou swimmest, even to the mountains, and the rivers shall be full of thee." Now he's filling their rivers with blood, but he's doing it with their bodies. Okay, that's what's going on here. Notice in verse 7. I just wanted to read that because I thought it was interesting that what I'm about to show you happens right after the rivers are being turned into blood by their own flesh, okay? Which may give you a little insight as far as why the sea is blood, why the rivers are blood, right? Why is that happening? Well, it just happens to be that people are dying, isn't it? That there's a lot of people that are just being killed, okay? Now, verse 7, "And when I shall put thee out, I will cover the heaven, and will make the stars thereof dark. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon shall not give her light. All the bright lights of heaven will I make dark over thee, and set darkness upon the land, saith the Lord God." So how's he doing it? Is it a solar eclipse? No, he's doing it with a cloud. Now, is this a cloud that's within our atmosphere, or is this a cloud that's out in space? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there's some type of way that he could do that that's outside of our atmosphere. It doesn't really matter, right? If he puts a cloud over all the earth, and makes it to where you can't see for that part. I mean, think about this. I mean, if you had a cloud that was basically covering a third part of the earth, and it was basically covering it a third part of that day and a third part of that night, because obviously the earth's spinning, and that's how he's keeping it from you seeing any light during that third part of it. I believe that's what's going on, and I believe when this happens, I believe it's going to be dark. It's not going to be just a little less light. Okay? Go to Exodus chapter 10. And the thing that we kept seeing with these plagues is, what do you keep seeing? Blood, blood, blood. Blood and fire upon the earth, blood in the seas, blood in the rivers. Sounds familiar to a plague that I remember in Egypt. right? Where he made the rivers and all the ponds of water and all the pools of water blood. But there's another plague that's mentioned, and notice what it says in verse 21. In Exodus 10, verse 21, it says, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Stretch out thine hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt. And Moses stretched forth his hand toward heaven, and there was a thick darkness in the land of Egypt, in the land of Egypt 3 days." Now, what I want you to notice here, first of all, darkness that can be felt. Now, some of us went to the cavern. We went to smoke hole caverns, and they turn off the lights. Literally every single time I've ever been in a cavern, they do that. All I think about is this verse right here: darkness that can be felt. And it talks about how God clothes, with darkness. He talks about like clothing the heavens with darkness and all that stuff. And it is kind of like a garment. You think about like how you'd feel a garment. You're like clothed in this darkness. And when you're in the cave and they turn out those lights, you can't see your hand in front of your face. I mean, it is dark. Like darkness that can be felt. And that's what I believe is happening when God does this judgment. It's not going to be a matter of like, well, it's just a little less light out here. We had a little solar eclipse. No, it's going to be dark. It's going to be pitch black. I believe darkness that can be felt. The thing I want you to notice here, though, notice what it says in verse 23. "They saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days, but all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings." Think about that for a second, right? You have Egypt that's right next to Goshen, but Goshen is light. There's light. They can see everything. Over here, complete darkness that can be felt like they're in a cave. That's quite a miraculous plague. I mean, think about that contrast on how you would do that, to where there would just be like light, like it's daytime. Over here, it's like you're in a cave. So, it could be a cloud. It could be something else. Maybe there's something else that he causes this darkness to just abide on that area. But think about all this culmination of like all these things happening. I mean, everything's turning into blood. There's all these crazy things that are going on. There's this noisome, grievous sore that's happening upon them. There's, the fact that they have to drink this water. They have to find water somehow to where they can survive. And then it's dark half the time, like a third of the time. And, a third of the day and a third of the night, I mean, obviously, during that time, you're going to be trying to do it anytime you can, right? So what's the third of the day when you think of 12 hours, right? What was that, 4, right? If I can do my math. I is an engineer, guys. So 4 hours of the day, 4 hours of the night, you have 8 hours that are just complete darkness. But then the rest, I mean, you still have the night. It's not like it's light during that time. So you're getting limited time that you can even do anything. And then these plagues are being poured out upon you at the same time. Go to Revelation chapter 8 and verse 13. And we'll end it up in the chapter here. And really, when you look at these plagues, there's, you say, oh, you're not going to go any deeper into those plagues. I mean, they're kind of self-explanatory, right? I mean, the land is being, hail and fire is coming down on the earth mingled with blood. Why is it mingled with blood? Probably because it's killing people as it's coming down. Then you have the fact that the sea is turning into blood, the rivers are turning into blood. You have the sun, moon, and stars that are being affected, meaning the light is being affected. It's getting, you have times of darkness. But in verse 13 here, this is very pertinent for the next 3 chapters. So chapter 9, 10, and 11 are going to be dealing with this. Notice what it says in verse 13. It says, "And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the 3 angels which are yet to sound." So we know that we've seen 4 trumpets. There's 3 to come. And these 3 are going to be even worse than the first 4. And notice, go to Revelation chapter 9 and verse 12. I want you to see here that the 5th trumpet is called the first woe. The 6th trumpet is called the second woe. And the 7th trumpet is the third woe. So you'll see that where it's like the first woe. And notice what it says here in verse 12. It says, "One woe is past, and behold, there come 2 woes more hereafter." So in verse 12, we've got past that 5th trumpet, going into the 6th trumpet, and it's saying, hey, there's 2 more to come. Then the 6th trumpet blows, That's the second woe. Chapter 11, verse 14. So Revelation chapter 11, verse 14. Revelation chapter 11, verse 14, we see the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. So right before the seventh trumpet sounds, it's basically saying, second woe is past, third woe comes quickly. So these next trumpets, if you thought that was bad, with the first four trumpets, it's just getting warmed up with what's about to happen. And if you read Revelation 9, you know it's about to get bad. Okay, it's about, and all I can say with this, Christian believer, is thank God we're not going to be here for that. Okay, meaning when you're reading this, you're just like, and sometimes I forget. You know, you ever read through the Bible, you're reading this like, man, this is horrible. Oh man, and you're like, oh wait a minute, I'm not going to be there. You know, like you're thinking about the locust, and they're like stinging people. Like, man, that's going to be horrible. Oh yeah, I'm not going to be there for that. So yeah, it's going to be horrible for them. And so, but anyway, that being said, is that there's some, if you think, you know, people dying and the blood and the water and all that stuff's bad, it's only going to get worse. But these things are interesting to see as far as how this plays out, how this correlates with other things that have already happened in the Bible, and seeing what's going on. And when we get to Revelation 11, actually, we're going to get some more information about what's going on during that time with the two witnesses. And then when we get to Revelation 15 and 16, you know, the same thing. And 15, 16, 17, 18, still the wrath of God. And it's actually the finale of the wrath of God is in chapter 19, where we're going to come on white horses with the Lord Jesus, and you're going to have the battle of Armageddon. Okay? So this is just starting it off. This is the beginning. This is the beginning of the wrath, but it's not done. And there's a lot more to come. And so it's exciting stuff to go through this and see this. And ultimately, just remember this, you know, thank God you're saved, you have eternal life, and that we're not appointed unto wrath, and that we're going to be in heaven, we're going to be with the Lord, and we're not going to be hurt of any of these plagues, but it's going to be coming upon the earth. So that's not what the word prayer, the Heavenly Father, we thank you for today, thank you for your word, and just pray that you be with us as we go home, as we go back to work this week, and Lord, just pray that you'd help us to be a witness for you, and help us to know the book of Revelation. And obviously, we want to know it for things that would pertain to us as we would go through any type of tribulations or great tribulation if need be. But Lord, also with these passages dealing with the wrath, I know there's things that we can learn and use in our Christian life. And Lord, just help us to learn it, to know it, and thank you for it. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.